Hello dear friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel Mukesh English. This is Mukesh Soni. In this video, I have brought you a very famous poem, Caged Bird, composed by Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou was an acclaimed American poet, storyteller, activist, and autobiographer. Angelou had a broad career as a singer, dancer, actress, composer, and Hollywood's first female black director, but she became most famous as a writer, editor, essayist, playwright, and poet. As a civil rights activist, Angelou worked for Dr. Martin Luther Jr. King Jr. She was also an educator and served as the Reynolds Professor of American Studies at Wake Forest University. Angela is best known for her series of 7 autobiographies which focus on her childhood and early adult experiences, and her first autobiography titled I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which was published in 1969 and which tells of her life after the age of 17 and brought her international recognition and acclaim. She was respected as a spokesperson for Black people and women, and her works have been considered a defense of Black culture. Her works are widely used in schools and universities worldwide, although attempts have been made to ban her books from some US libraries. So this is a brief introduction about a famous poet, Maya Angelou. Now let's know about this poem and the poem's title. If you go through the poem's full title is here, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and the short title is here, Caged Bird. So the poem I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou is one of the most acclaimed poetic pieces written by the prominent African-American poet Maya Angelou, inspired by Paul Laurence Dunbar's poem Sympathy. And this poem first appeared in 1983 in the collection of her poems titled Why Don't You Sing? Angelou's autobiography also had the same title, which only suggests that the title of this poem and the motif it carries was immensely significant to Maya Angelou. She often felt that her words were not heard because of the color of her skin. She felt that in some ways she was still experiencing slavery, although African American people were free people in Maya Angelou's time. There were still many restrictions on them in society that many Black Americans did not feel free at all. This poem reveals the depth of those feelings. The text from her autobiography reveals that Maya Angelou often felt like the bird in a cage in this poem. She felt restricted from enjoying the freedom that should have been her right as a human being. Responding to this with great courage and determination, she wrote and sang and danced because it was her way of expressing her longing for freedom. So that's a brief introduction about this poem. Now let's know the difficult words meanings here. Leaps means jumps, claim the sky means to say over the full as one's own, stalk, follow, narrow cage, the restricted place, rage means anger, clipped means cut short, trill means quiver or the wobble, or the sighing trees, the sound produced by the leaves of the trees in winds. We can say here the grave of dreams means to say the dreams that seem to be dead. Longed means desired, which you long it, which you really would like to fulfill it. Okay, now let's begin the poem stanza wise. The poem has about 6 stanzas. Stanza number 1. Maya Angelou says, the free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. The opening lines show a bird leaping on the back of the wind, demonstrating the freedom it experiences to move about and glide freely through the air. It hovers over a stream of wind and floats downward to where the current of the stream ends and the wind is very, very calm. It dips its wings in the seas of orange sunlight. The bird is shown in a state of great tranquility. It has the freedom to move about wherever it desires. It is so utterly free and without any restrictions that the expression says it dares to claim the sky. So the whole firmament in his one is something like a big home. So this is about stanza number 1. Stanza number 2. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. Now, here, the poet Maya Angelou contrasts the situation by presenting the image of a caged bird. The caged bird tries to go after his cage in vain. The cage is narrow and its metaphorical bars are of rage. A lot of anger can be seen. The caged bird is seen to be angry with its situation. It desires with all its heart to escape its plight, but the caged bird cannot see beyond his cage. Its wings are clipped. That means to say its freedom is taken away. The wings are associated with flight, which is in turn is associated with freedom. The words like his wings are clipped means to say its freedom is forcibly taken away. It has no freedom. It cannot fly. It cannot fly even it desires. Its feet are very much tied. A bird tied to the ground represents an image completely opposite to its true nature of flight. This represents the fact of alienation of the bird. But the most important thing is that despite being in this utterly despondent predicament, means to say loneliness, the caged bird opens his throat to sing. That seems to be his only joy and achievement in life. The caged bird, which cannot come out, the caged bird who has lost its freedom, but at least the caged bird has the right to sing. That brings her joy and achievement in her life. Stanza 3. The caged bird sings with fearful trill of the things unknown, but longed for still, and his tune is heard of the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The caged bird has a wavering voice, which keeps on moving on. He's singing of freedom, something he does not have. The idea of freedom is his dream, and which he cannot achieve. So the caged bird sings about the freedom. But at the same time, this caged bird's voice has a kind of a fear. There's a fear in his voice. He had never known what freedom tastes like, but always hopes to have it for his own. It has never tasted the freedom. His voice can be heard from a distant places like hills where it inspires others to dream of freedom. The caged bird does not sing of sadness. The caged bird does not sing of sadness or the despondent. The caged bird always sings of hope, inspiration, and of freedom because her song is a her song shows the positivity, her song shows the optimism. Though the caged bird is not happy to be in the cage, though the caged bird is not happy having lost his freedom, but even though through his song he expresses hope, inspiration, and freedom. Stanza 4. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. The free bird, on the other hand, reveals in his freedom He enjoys flying through the trade wind that blows through the trees. Sighing trees means to say, the expression sighing trees means to say, sighing the sound which is made by the breeze, the wind, while passing through the leafy branches. It gives an indication of the lack of freedom. Sighing trees here refers to the bird does not have the freedom, as the trees are also tied to the ground like the caged bird. So the trees also don't have the freedom. Similarly, the birds also don't have the freedom, as the trees' legs are tied to the ground. The free bird thinks of the fat worm that will be his food. With the wind in his feathers, water and earth beneath him, and the whole sky with him, he feels majestic in his hand, in his freedom, and calls the entire sky as something like his own domain, his own home. And by names, the sky his own, the poet here wishes to express that the bird knows himself to be the proprietor of his whole universe. So the whole universe is the home of the bird. So here, the sky here refers to the universe. Now let's move to the stanza 5. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. Now here, inversely, the caged bird knows that he's not flying in the sky and he's not free. He's a captive, he's a prisoner. So, what does he do? He stands on the grave of dreams because his dreams are not getting fulfilled. He knows his dreams of flying in a free firmament to experience the freedom is completely futile, is completely all in vain. There's no meaning to dream of the freedom or to be free in this life. He had lost all the hopes of freedom. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. That means to say it's more pitiable, more adverse than a nightmare. The kind of experience the bird is feeling, it's more pitiable, it's more adverse than anybody who experiences a kind of a nightmare. His wings are clipped, his feet are tied. There's only and only a little hope of freedom. So the bird opens his throat to sing, to express her freedom, that it cannot walk, it cannot come out, but at least the bird has the freedom to sing. The bird has the right to sing because that's her right, that nobody can stop her to sing. The bird wishes to travel against all the adversities. So there is a faint but kindling voice of hope in his song. Look at the contrast here. There's a faintful voice, at the same time there's very optimistic voice which we can find here in the stanza. Then we find here stanza number 6. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Now, in this stanza, there's a refrain here, the caged bird sings. This refrain recurring as a stanza that justifies the bird's stout determination to keep going after his dream of freedom. So till last 5 stanzas we have seen here, the bird is very much determined to get the freedom, and the bird also knows that it will not get the freedom. So what does the bird does? The bird sings because that's a right. Moreover, the caged bird chooses to sing as this is the only freedom available to him that he can enjoy without any restriction. His wings are clipped, his feet are tied, but his throat is not choked. This is something the poet have felt at heart. That's why Maya Angelou uses the title, I know why the cage's bird sings. The original title, I know why the cage's bird sings. So this might be seen as the poet's message to raise a voice, to express ourselves even though the stronger wants to suppress the weaker, and to never give up no matter what situation we are in. So this is what we have discussed here. Now in nutshell, in let's sum up the whole poem. Maya Angelou creates contrasting images of how a free bird and a caged bird live their lives. Maya Angelou has brought a contrasting image how a free bird lives his life, and how a caged bird live his life. The free bird enjoys the open sky and floats on the back of the wind. On the other hand, the caged bird's wings are clipped and its feet are tied. The caged bird's future looks very bleak. Still, the caged bird sings in a fearful voice. He sings of freedom. Maya Angelou, with the metaphor of birds, represents the inequality of justice seen in the society of her time, which differentiates between the African American community and its white American counterpart. So this is about the brief sum up of this poem. Now let's have a brief discussion about the different themes which we can go through and we can see in this poem. So we find here four important themes to be discussed in this poem: freedom and slavery, despair and hope, fear and courage, and adversity and good fortune. If you go through the literary devices, we find here the poet has employed metaphor in the expression the caged bird sings, as well as the imagery. We find the imagery here. Um, we find the imagery like wings are clipped and his feet are tied, orange sun rays, fat worms, dips his wings, opens his throat. So these are the examples of the imagery. At the same time, we find here the another expression, juxtaposition. Juxtaposition means the poem compares the two birds in different situation. Slavery is in contrast to freedom. The caged bird and the free bird have different point of view. Then we find personification in the expression the sighing trees. Then later we find symbolism, where the appearance of the caged bird is a symbol of captivity and the free bird is a symbol of freedom. And finally, we find here the another expression like assonance. Assonance means to say the repetition of vowel sounds which occur many times. So we find the assonance in the two lines. Line number 1, a free bird leaps, and the line number 23, the free bird thinks of another breeze. So there's a repetition of vowel sound. Then we find here alliteration. We find alliteration. In the alliteration means to say the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of the sentences. So we find repetition in the line number 8. But a bird that stalks but and bird in the line number 10 can seldom see through. So seldom and see. So dear friends, this is how I have tried to summarize, I have tried to analyze the most famous poem, Caged Bird, by a famous poet, Maya Angelou. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click on like button and write in the comment box. If you're not yet subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. Thank you so much once again.